Gentlemen, start your engine! And one by one, these power plants...
And the engines are fired and ready to go as up and down in front of the state capitol in Denver, Colorado, and before a sellout crowd of over 55,000 people. The Indy cars begin to roar. The call goes out to the crews and drivers for the very first time through the streets and off the walls of the buildings of downtown Denver. This city is alive with excitement. It's a most historic moment. The Indy cars are now ready to run. We're in the majestic Rocky Mountains of Colorado, overlooking downtown Denver, a combination of historic buildings and great beauty, both in the faces of the people and their city. An old-time western town, gone metropolitan. A rustic quaintness combined with modern ingenuity. And today it's a setting for the Indy cars and a run through the streets. The first time the Indy cars have been in the state since 1970, and their first time ever on these downtown streets. All the glamour and the excitement of IndyCar racing comes to Denver. Horsepower and speed take over the streets for a day as the Indy cars go racing in the inaugural Grand Prix of Denver. Al Unser Jr. comes here with a large lead in the PPG points race. Wily veteran Rick Mears' consistency has kept him in the hunt, and Michael Andretti is right there battling as well as the Indy cars head for the streets. It's a bright sun that shines down on Denver, Colorado. Temperatures climbing into the 90s for the Texaco Haviland Denver Grand Prix. Hello and welcome. I'm Paul Page. We've got a marvelous points fight underway in the Indy cars right now. Al Unser Jr. is out in front and he has a little bit of breathing room. No one can surpass him in the contest here today. Michael Andretti is right now second in the points. And of those 104 points that he has, 72 have been earned on temporary circuits this year. So he's definitely a man to watch. Rick Mears is third. Now, only twice before have the kart Indy cars raced at an elevation of a mile or higher at Mexico City, and both times Rick Mears won the race. Bobby Unser, what does the elevation mean here at Denver?
Well, Paul, I think whole key to this race is going to be hot brakes, overheating engines, and tired race drivers. Because Denver is 5,000 feet in elevation, the air is real thin, causes lots of heating problems.
All right, the closing stages of the season. Now, Sam Posey, different crews have different objectives.
Well, the championship contenders are going to have to tread very carefully in a race many expect will see a number of crashes, whereas Teo Fabi and the others who have no chance in the championship, they're prepared to let her rip.
Well, the car's already rolling on the pace lap. We take a look at the starting field. Teo Fabi, the 9th pole of his career. Al Unser Jr., most of his 13 wins have come on straight circuits. It's the Andretti family that makes up the second row. Back in row number 3, Emerson Fittipaldi, Danny Sullivan. The 4th row, Rick Mears, John Andretti. In the 5th row, it's Eddie Cheever and Arie Luyendyk, the Indy champion. Then Roberto Guerrero with Alpha Power in the 6th row alongside Raul Boesel. In the 7th row, Canadian Scott Goodyear and Bobby Rahal. The 8th row, Jan Bigas and Dominic Dobson. Back in the 9th row, Willie T. Ribbs and Didier Tays. The 10th row, Scott Brayton and Jeff Wood. The 11th row, Wally Dallenbach Jr., here making a start in his home state, and Michael Greenfield. Mike Groff and the great A.J. Foyt make up the 12th row. The 13th row, Hiro Matsushita and Dean Hall. The 14th row, Randy Lewis and Tony Bettenhausen. Take a look over the shoulder of Al Unser Jr., and we take a look at what this circuit here in downtown Denver looks like.
Well, it's a very beautiful circuit, but remember, look at that, 16 turns in only 2 miles, a little less than 2 miles. This is the crookedest, busiest circuit on the entire championship circuit.
1.909 miles, the measured distance. The key, as Bobby Unser has already suggested, with the temperature at 89 degrees right now and climbing and the humidity down, will be, will the engines last, will the brakes last, especially considering the air here is about 15% down in density from sea level.
And also, Paul, look at running in a tunnel. You don't get much breeze coming down through there. That makes it a little bit hotter. Every time a car goes through, the air gets a little hotter.
There's the lineup of chassis ready to run today as the field now carefully working its way past the pits. The pits are physically separated from the straight that holds the start-finish line. There's the lineup of engines racing here today. Now just one turn lies ahead of the cars, and they should be seeing a green flag. They'll come off the last turn slowly if they can to allow everybody to get on the stretch. Nick Finaro gives the green flag, and Teo Fabi jumps into the lead, chased by Al Unser Jr. as the Andretti family battles it out for third. Off the longest straight, the look back at Danny Sullivan. Fabi's still out in front as everybody strings through. Some apprehension in these first laps. Look at Luyendyk as he tries an outside maneuver, because as they are running through, of course, these are the first racing laps for the Indy cars on a tight, twisting, and very narrow circuit.
Teo Fabi knows that this team that he's driving for now will probably be dissolving at the end of the year, and thus his future too is uncertain. He's 35 years old. He's talked of retirement. Today means a lot to him.
Teo Fabi, the pole sitter, chased by Al Unser Jr.
Everybody should watch, Paul, how the track goes from being narrow to wide back to being narrow. This has an awful lot to do where the passing goes. That, for example, is a good turn to pass. One coming up, one coming close to the pits. That's a good place to pass.
Michael Andretti lies in third. There comes Mario, then Danny Sullivan, and then Eddie Cheever, followed by Emerson Fittipaldi, Rick Mears, and John Andretti.
You see the crowd sold out. Many spectators have never seen a race before here anywhere.
The first lap of racing through the streets of Denver, Colorado, about to go into the record book as Fabi makes a turn onto the long stretch in front of the state capitol.
Now this is one track, you saw how little Al got really close to Teo Fabi there. This is one track where your radiators are going to get hot. You watch Mario.
Here for third place, third, fourth, and fifth, all right together.
We always seem to have Mario and Michael right together, with Michael leading there right now, but as we watch them, Paul, even their places they run on the track, their grooves are almost identical.
Two good fights. Mario had to stab the brakes hard, and it looked like there was a little contact there. Danny Sullivan pulled right up into the fight as well. As they come around to the completion of lap number 2, you ride on board with Mario. Good fight for third place, not a bad fight for the lead.
Mario is faster right now than his son Michael. You can see it. He's trying to press it. He's trying to say, let me by. I can carry the fight forward if you'll let me by.
I don't know if it was a let, but Mario moves past, picks up the position. Michael drops back. Part of the philosophy, though, Bobby Unser, will be the tactic that Michael has proven so strong at this season of pacing your own race and not overusing the car.
That's right, but there is another part to that story. Right now the tires are fresh, the track is fairly clean, not much rubber on it. It's hard to pass at some place on this track, so Mario's opting to try it really hard right now, and that's how he got Michael.
Looking backwards from Mario Andretti's car.
Yes, Bobby, these opening laps are so important because as the race wears on, this is going to become a one-groove track. Debris on the course and gravel and just the tire, little stuff coming off the tires is going to make it very narrow, a very narrow groove toward the end. We're going to see some accidents in the last 10 laps.
The number 7 car of Danny Sullivan up to challenge Michael Andretti for all practical purposes. Danny in front of the hometown crowd. He makes his home in Aspen, Colorado, and he's hoping for a strong result here today as he challenges Michael Andretti. And there you can see Eddie Cheever in that number 15 car pulling right in behind and joining that fight as well. Then Emerson Fittipaldi lies back about 50 yards.
This is the turn coming off right into where the pits are. And this gets where it's really rough. Right around to the right, we watch the patches in the road there. It gets very slippery. Around the left, then a little short straightaway. Watch later on. This is a good place to pass.
Then you come on the longest, the fastest section of this course as Sullivan continues to come up and challenge Michael Andretti. The fight, of course, is for fourth place. Sullivan's right in. You could pass under braking here. Eddie Cheever closing in as well, so a good little fight developing here.
Now, Michael knows he's being pressed really hard right now, so you can watch Michael run a little bit offline. That's a defensive move instead of an aggressive move. Right now, his car's not working as good as it's been every day.
Cheever, who is the third of this group right here, has had his strongest performances on tracks just like this. Twice in his Formula One career, he was second on street courses, and this year he's had 2 third places on street courses. So look for Cheever right there, third car in this group to move up.
Well, the fight for fourth place between Michael and man, Danny Sullivan, has in fact allowed both Cheever and now you see Fittipaldi coming off the corner as they seem to be closing down, but it's Danny Sullivan that is pressing Michael.
Well, you see Michael let his dad by, but he's not going to let Danny Sullivan by. Big difference.
You know, Sam, I don't believe they really let each other by. There's a lot of competition between father and son, even though they get along really good on the same team. I think Mario has been embarrassed with Michael outrunning him sometimes this year.
You saw it there. You should see it plenty. A puff of smoke off of the tires as Danny Sullivan came down on the brakes hard. But Bobby Unser conserving the brakes is going to be of paramount interest here today.
It really will. In fact, as we walked through the pits this morning, we saw the different concepts about how they're going to cool the brakes. Some of them had really big brake scoops. Some of them had about what we call medium-sized brake scoops. Now, these two cars right there, Mario Andretti and Danny Sullivan, they had big scoops. Those guys have been doing this a long time.
Early on, you saw Raul Boesel fall by the wayside in that Judd-powered True Sports machine. Right now, he is with Jack Arute.
And Paul, he's very disappointed. He had hoped to run all afternoon here at Denver. What put you out, Raul?
Well, after 2 corners already, the car started to misfire after the start, and it started to see a lot of smoke from the back, and our day was done.
They talk about running on a street course and how tough it can be on your hands. He was set for tough going today. He can take that tape off now. It's virtually unused.
In the meantime, back at the front of the field, it's a three-way battle for the lead. Teo Fabi, the Porsche-powered machine, has it. The Valvoline car, that is Al Unser Jr. just behind, and now Mario Andretti has come up to do battle.
Watch how close Fabi comes to these walls as we watch from Al Unser Jr.'s car. Fabi is really pushing. I think he's at some risk. He's pushing so hard right now.
So 4 laps are now complete in the inaugural Denver Grand Prix. Teo Fabi has led right from the green flag, but there's a good battle at the front. We'll be back. We're back at the Texaco Havoline Grand Prix, riding now on board with the now second place Mario Andretti as he chases the car just ahead that belongs to Teo Fabi, the Porsche-powered machine. Now, the last time that Teo Fabi led the opening laps of an event, he went on to win at Mid-Ohio last year. Could that prophecy take place here today? A very long, very difficult day lies ahead. As you see, Mario is right there and challenging Fabi at every corner.
I talked to Mario last night after practice. He said that getting the car to handle just right is very, very hard here. He was having problems with traction. He was discouraged. He said it's a crapshoot, but I know I can find that handling that I need in my car because Little Al, who has a similar car, found it in his. Obviously, overnight, Mario guessed right.
And Al Unser Jr. runs in third now, giving up the second place. He's back just a bit. Now here comes Mario. He tries down the inside as he tries to maneuver under braking. Doesn't get it done, but Mario definitely wants to lead this race. As they come on to the curve that has a semicircle really around the pits, and it was at this point that they just passed in the earlier laps of the race that 2 of the cars actually got together. It's an onboard look, Bobby. It's Mario and Michael. You're looking for Mario's car.
Now look how close they get right there.
Whoa, close is more than what they got.
It may not have been a contact, but if it wasn't, it was so close it might as well be.
Oh, look at the brakes line up and he comes off the course. The brakes fail for Teo Fabi and he goes into the tire barrier.
Now what happened there is he locked his front brakes, Paul. He had no way. You have to have, as deep as they drive in these turns, you have to have all 4 wheels working equal. Now something happened to Fabi's rear brakes. He only had front ones. It means he has no steering and no way to stop.
So Teo Fabi into the barrier. We'll keep an eye on him. It looked like he would be okay. A corner worker immediately there to make sure that he was.
Now remember, this is one thing we said coming into this race, the brakes. That's going to be the #1 problem. Second #2 problem is going to be overheating engines.
So the yellow flag comes out here in Denver. The crews are right there with Teo. And he's obviously talking to them, so it's assumed that he's okay.
He went into a tire barrier, which is certainly the nicest of all the barriers.
Let's go to Jack Arute.
Well, Teo Fabi's entire crew, the only indication they've got of the condition of their driver is by watching a small television monitor. Due to the extensive sellout here, they've lifted the black for ABC Sports coverage today, and they are watching the replay as Teo Fabi went down into turn #1, locking the brakes up. Let's see if we can get a word with Derek Walker, who calls the shots. Derek, your first look at this crash, your impressions?
Well, I don't know. It's difficult to say. It looks like a little bit of a braking problem. We don't know. It's difficult to say, really.
Have you talked to Teo on the radio?
No, not yet.
Well, as we said, their only indication of what's going on down in turn number 1 is by our coverage in turn number 1 on ABC.
So the yellow comes out at the start-finish line. We'll take a look at this situation. Bobby Unser from the view that Mario Andretti had running in second place.
You can just watch the front tire just light up. He hits the brakes, he lets off a little bit. He made an attempt to turn right here where Mario is. He made an attempt to turn there, but without traction, he has to stop. He can't turn.
And don't think for a split second Mario isn't thinking to himself, gotcha, because he applied the pressure relentlessly. He forced Teo to brake later than Teo wanted to. And boy, that's the nicest way to take the lead.
You can just see the amount of safety that there is here at Denver. He slowed down by going through one tire barrier, then went into another one. And I might just point out again, that's a lot better than hitting a concrete wall at that speed.
So Mario Andretti has the lead here. He has led in 5 of the 7 IndyCar road races this year. Now let's take a look at that replay again. Take a look at the rears, though, Bobby. It looks as if the rears are trying to grip.
Well, they are, but remember what we said, Paul. You have to have 50% braking on each end. The fronts are locking up and the smoke is just going around the rears. Watch the top of the front tires and you can just see the smoke curling around. The rears are literally almost doing nothing.
Teo takes a pretty good hit to the head there from that tire wall.
Well, there's Teo Fabi, so apparently he's okay, which is good news for all of us and for the fans of Teo Fabi around the world, especially the fans of this effort.
Denver is the 9th temporary course to debut in kart's 12 years, and in previous 8 of those 9 courses, Mario has 3 wins and 2 seconds and 1/3. A statistic his man Mike Knight came up with, and it suggests that Mario, in terms of history, is a heavy favorite here and right now.
So in Denver, on the streets, Al Unser Jr. now assumes second place, but is being pressured by Danny Sullivan, who begins to move up through this field now. We saw him in a battle earlier. Mario Andretti out in front, running smoothly, then Little Al, then Danny Sullivan, then Michael Andretti, then Eddie Cheever with a superlative run today, being chased by Fittipaldi, then Ray Hall, then the only hope of the Porsche left, John Andretti.
One of the things we're going to expect to see today, Paul, is cars like Little Al was running behind really close a little while ago to this car, Teo Fabi, backing off a little bit. Remember the cooling. We've got to keep in mind cooling to the radiators.
So Teo Fabi stands with the race physician Terry Trammell and Steve Albee while the flags fly yellow around the course. We have a full course yellow. Mario Andretti uses the opportunity to head down into the pit area. His pit is well down, one of the last pits there is. Danny Sullivan comes in as well. So most of the cars decide that this on lap 9 is a good opportunity to stop for service. Michael Andretti being waved in by the crew just ahead. So the leader of the race, Mario Andretti, comes in, makes a stop. Danny Sullivan lights the tires coming out. These pits are incredibly narrow, and they really must tiptoe as they come out of the pits. Not only are they narrow, but they're semicircular.
First use of these semicircular pits. Interesting to see how it works out.
A bit unusual for the Indy cars because the pits and the start-finish line are separated. The crews can't actually see the finish line. The race continues, but under yellow. We'll be back with more. We're back on the streets of downtown Denver, Colorado, as the Indy cars run under the caution. You're on board taking a look at Al Unser Jr., who, with the pit stops made under the caution at the 9th lap, assumed the lead of the race, followed by Bobby Rahal, Arie Luyendyk, and then Scott Goodyear. Al Unser Jr. from time to time has been struggling with an earphone underneath his helmet, using his caution period to try to get it plugged back in.
And one of the main problems right there, Paul, is going to be that if you don't be able to hear on the radios, if you can't hear, they can't see the pit boards too well because they're in the middle of a turn when they go by the pits.
Let's go to the pits and Gary Gerould.
Well, Bobby was talking about the importance of brakes and what a factor it's going to be in this race. Everybody concerned about it. It may have contributed to the Fabi incident. We've got a backup car here from Simon Racing. This is a normal-sized air intake brake scoop on the front left. This is the biggest that they have. They have at least this much ducting to direct air into the tires on all of these cars. Many of the drivers, however, have gone even beyond that. All of the Penske cars have doubled up. Not only the biggest duct that you'd normally see back here, they've added another duct on the inside. One goes to the caliper, one to the brake itself. We have seen brake temperatures in practice and qualifying of in excess of 600 degrees Celsius. That's 13 to 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't have brakes, you can't attack the course. And everybody knows it's going to be a struggle all day long to keep the brakes cool because there are no high-speed portions to this course. They're trying to get all the air to the brakes they possibly can. We've already seen on pit road Dominic Dobson's crew changing brake pads in the first 10 laps of this race. Paul?
Well, thank you, Gary. And as we mentioned at starting, there is no question about it that the brakes are going to be a factor. No double turn is the sign. Teo Fabi straight off the track at that point. So here in Denver, it is Al Unser Jr. in front, followed by Ray Hall, Luyendyk, and Scott Goodyear. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. We're back in Denver, still under a full course caution caused when the pole sitter Teo Fabi slid off the course while leading the race and caught the tire barrier. There's more racing action coming up next. The final round in the International Race of Champions to determine the overall champion of the series. Quite a run. That's coming up right after coverage here live from Denver. Let's go to Jack Arute.
Paul, throughout the early going of this race, we've noticed some puffs of white smoke coming from Al Unser Jr.'s car. Well, we checked in with Rick Gallis, the man that calls the shots down there in Al Jr.'s car. He says they feel they may have filled the tanks, the oil tanks, just a little bit too full, and it's going into the overflow. And with the oppressive heat here, it's actually tending to vaporize a bit, showing that white smoke. One thing that all the crews are extremely concerned about after that first stop is trying to get the radiators cool. The steam is just emanating from them when they come to a stop here. So we'll keep you abreast of that throughout the day as well.
Well, as you can see from the perspiration right there, temperature is increasing. There's Big Al. Remember, he broke his upper right leg in a practice accident before the Michigan 500, and he is now right behind Little Al's pit, keeping track of the progress of his son. Now, Mario Andretti took the lead when Teo Fabi went into the barrier, dropped back to fifth. You ride with him now. We asked him before the race, can you in fact enforce other drivers to use up their car?
Well, yeah, I suppose you can by keeping pressure on, but it's a fine line, isn't it? You know, by keeping pressure on, obviously you have to go into the corners hard because that's the only place you're going to pass. But the guy up front just doesn't know what problems you may have, so you'll always perhaps try to go deeper to be safe, and maybe that's what's going to happen. It's going to be quite a bit of a strategy race.
I'll tell you, Mario Andretti may be 50 years old this year, but he has the raw enthusiasm of a rookie.
Well, he under the caution. We've had 4 laps of caution. Al Unser Jr. has the lead, followed by Ray Hall as we take a look down through the order. Bobby's stopping, making your pit stop, lap 9, lap 10. What about that as a strategy?
Well, it might be that Rick Gallis has used a good strategy for Al Jr. Little Al is going to be a lot lighter on fuel. He's in the front in the serial scoring right now, leading the race, and it's going to be easier on his brakes and his tires right now. And they're still going to have to make a 2-stop race. So I think right now Rick Gallis's theory looks the best.
Well, the caution period a bit long. Have to get Teo Fabi's car off of the circuit. But every time you start with a new temporary circuit, there is a certain learning factor, a break in time. Look at the crowd as they're all over the tops of the buildings here in downtown Denver. They've really done a marvelous job getting this track ready.
This track,
as the green comes out, they come off the last turn. There's Nick Finaro with the green, and Michael Andretti comes up to challenge Little Al. Or excuse me, Bobby Rahal. I'm thinking 2 years back, Bobby Rahal, who was running in second, comes back and challenges his teammate, Shades of the Michigan 500.
That's right, Paul. Shades of Michigan 500. Little Al and Ray Hall going at it tooth and toenail.
remember, Ray Hall has not won a race this year. The man who won the second most races through the decade of the 80s has 5 second places, a galling situation which he finds himself.
Now, another thing that may be a good decision that Rick Gallis did in reference to Little Al is he's running out in front, cooler air. Ray Hall, for example, in the back. Just imagine all the heat coming out of Little Al's engine is going into Ray Hall's radiator. Now, that's one of the reasons why they get as hot as we heard from Jack Arute.
So it's Ray Hall chasing his teammate Little Al. Arie Luyendyk is third. Scott Goodyear sitting back and forth. Teo Fabi is now with Jack Arute.
And he's not at all happy having to watch the rest of this race from the sidelines. Teo, what happened?
Well, I'm quite happy to be in one pieces. The brake pedal went down to the floor, and by the time I was able to pump it up, it was way too late to make the corner.
Hitting the tire restraining area the way you did, you got hit in the head pretty good.
Well, sure, the tire helped a lot, but it was quite a big impact.
Good news, but also could be bad news, Paul Page. We've got our first documented brake failure of the afternoon.
And that certainly is something that all the teams are going to be keeping track of, and I'm sure as Teo makes his walk down the pits, by the side of the course, that's Willie T. Ribbs in the Rayner car.
Now, one of the things that might have been happening to Teo Fabi's brakes is what happened to Scott Pruitt in a test. That's a little bleed valves in the back just pop right out, Paul.
This is Willie's 5th race of the year. His best finish so far, 20th. He has not had a good rookie season.
So Willie T. Ribbs gesturing to the course marshals here that he'd like to get hooked up and towed in. Whatever the problem is, I'm sure that he feels that it's fixable.
There are not very many places that a race car that quits can get off the racetrack on a street course. Willie got to the safest place he could get, but what he's really hoping for is a tow in.
There's Scott Goodyear, the young Canadian in the Mackenzie cars, having a terrific year in the Indy cars. Really has been driving well on all forms of the circuit. You look back, there's Mario in pursuit. Andretti trying to close on Arie Luyendyk. That was Dominic Dobson. Luyendyk just maneuvered around. Now Mario comes around Dominic. And Mario closes in, trying to forge his way back up to the front of this race once again. Another view of Scott Goodyear, an 11 machine. Great year for this young man.
Many people have said that Eddie Cheever will win the Rookie of the Year, but really he has experience. He's an older man. Scott Goodyear, of the real charging young rookies, gets my nod. He's had a terrific season.
Now there's you coming off of turn 16, going down the front straightaway, which is the longest and the fastest. The difference on how fast you get off that turn makes the difference whether you can pass going into this one, which is turn 1, Paul.
Still at the front of the field, it is Al Unser Jr. being chased by his teammate. Scott Goodyear trying to overhaul Dominic Dobson. Looks to both sides, tries to get inside the corner, but Dominic sweeps across the front.
You have to show the other man that you're there without allowing him to cut you off and break your rhythm and your speed. Usually once a lap is enough of that. Scott might be starting to show a little impatience here.
And it's very difficult on this track, as Sam was saying, because you not only have to look in your mirror to see who's there, but you have to look where you're going at the crookedest track on the circuit.
Well, Goodyear has got Roberto Guerrero right behind him, so he not only has to think about trying to pass Dobson, but also he has to look at Guerrero behind him.
Here's Arie Luyendyk with Mario Andretti right behind him. The battle here is for third place. Watching Mario try to get to the inside. He is really challenging. They come on to the pit curve. It truly is a semicircular curve through the park here as Mario drops back a bit off of Luyendyk, perhaps setting up so he can run him down the long straightaway. They're making that turn onto the long start-finish straight now.
You really have to get a jump right there. You really have to get a run at this guy, and Mario didn't get a run at like he wanted to get right there in order to pass right down here. Now we're coming right into turn 1. See, Mario didn't get close enough, and yet he did get a little bit of a draft there, Paul.
So the pursuit now is Arie Luyendyk being chased by Mario Andretti, and Danny Sullivan has closed in behind Mario as well. So 3 cars battle here for third.
Now this is the second longest straightaway into a left-hand turn. It's 120 degrees, the longest turn on the whole track.
Fight continues on the streets of Denver as we take a look through the entire running order. Sullivan is now in here and charging.
This track is really downtown, like Long Beach and Monaco, not off in a park or a parking lot like the races in Miami and Las Vegas.
Mario doing everything he can to worry Arie Luyendyk. On board with Mario now. That's Luyendyk just ahead. And Luyendyk now has to deal with some slower traffic.
Average speed in qualifying was 79 miles an hour, the slowest of all the kart circuits. It doesn't seem like it, though, does it here?
Now when you're running down in between these barriers with a turn every few seconds, it's flat. plenty fast.
Lyondike is really defending his position.
Speed
is relative, of course. And,
speed up to 150 mile an hour, Sam, and then right down to probably 40 miles
There
an hour.
goes Mario. Mario finally finds room and comes past the inside of Lyondike. Now Sullivan lines up.
That's the only pass we've seen. This is coming by the pit turns. We like to call it straightaway. Here's a popular place. There's Danny going right inside. Danny got it.
Look at Danny.
Wow.
What a fight we've got going here.
That's one of the best places to pass. Now we're going down the long straightaway.
Now Michael comes around Lyondike, and Michael comes up forward. Now to challenge Danny Sullivan. Allenser Jr. runs alone at the front. Second place is Bobby Rahal. We're watching now a four-way battle for third place.
That was opportunistic driving by Danny Sullivan there in number 7. He watched the battle between Andretti and Lyondike, saw it shape up, and seized the moment. Terrific stuff.
Well, of course, on this kind of a circuit, Bobby Unser, that's exactly the way you have to play it. When an opportunity opens, you've just got to charge through it.
Yes, and braking. Braking's where most of the passing happens, especially on a course. 16 corners. So just think of the opportunities you have. Now, Danny Sullivan just sat back, looked at that, he waited, then he says brakes. Kept him cool and went for it.
But it's funny, the way every now and then you will see something happen in the race itself which will manifest the way a man is in real life. And Danny Sullivan, of course, with sponsors, with opportunities of all kinds, is a man who knows when to move and move decisively.
Well, here it is again. There's Danny Sullivan at the back of this order in the number 7 car. Now watch him as he takes advantage. He moves inside Lyondike. Dives into the corner, just standing on top of the brakes to get that done, and slides in behind Mario.
Boy, that
totally ruined the way he would normally take that turn, but he just blocked out the guy he was trying to pass, and that's the way to do it.
Back at the front of the field now, Bobby Rahal closes down on Al Unser Jr. and challenges as Rahal comes to the inside.
Now that is, Rahal was in a place that little Al could hardly see him. That's the type of places in passing that you worry about. The place where about 45 degrees to the back of the car, where it's blind to the guy that's in the lead.
Two teammates at it again, just like they were in the closing laps of the Michigan 500. That race, of course, a favorable result for Al Unser Jr.
Don't be confused by the different colors of the cars. As Paul said, they are teammates, but allowed to race each other. I think that should be perfectly clear, although obviously the respective sponsors of these cars are biting their nails right now.
Get another puff of blue smoke at the back of Little Al's car. And, of course, Jackaroo checked that out earlier, and the report was they're not concerned about it. Let's go back again to Jackaroo.
Paul, one of the concerns that we've alluded to, though, is overheating. Now, we've taken the backup car of Scotty Brayton, and we're going to show you the normal livery of a car before it got here to Denver. This would be the air outlet area out of the radiators. But what all the teams have done is they have cut as far forward as this, across, and then all the way down to open this whole area up, try to force more of that reduced air through the radiators. Now, one of the things that they found, though, is with all that, including adding some wicker bills to the front, it helps, but only for a few moments. If you're in the back behind another car, all of that opening doesn't help you at all, and the temperature can go as high as 280 degrees. They say the difference is so critical that you can only run behind a car for as much as maybe 2 or 3 laps, and then you've got to breathe it. By the way, when they get away from Denver, you know how much it'll cost them to fix this bodywork? Over $5,000.
You may be seeing a very good example of that, Jackaroo, as we're watching Bobby Rahal in second place chase the leader, and when he does have an opportunity to dart out on straightaways, he will move out to the side and try to get some clean air through those coolers, which are so critical. And part of the reason that they've had to do this is because of the air density. It's 15% less here, so there's not as much air passing through those coolers. They're not as efficient. Al Unser Jr. is out in front, followed by Rahal, then Mario, then Danny Sullivan, then Michael Andretti with 20 laps complete in Denver. We'll be back. Back on the streets of Denver, Al Unser Jr. moments ago with Bobby Rahal coming down the inside and picking up the lead of the race. So Rahal now in front. Let's go to the pits for this report.
Paul, there's a very distinct possibility that heat may have made Willie T. Ribbs an early victim as well. He reported an engine misfire. He had to get a tow to the pits. He came in, they changed the electronic box and also the black box. They're still very hot to touch. The heat and the electronics, a tough combination. They made the change. He's back on course and is now running. And of course, they expect a high attrition rate. If he can keep it running, he still may end up with a decent payday. Paul?
All right, so they're fighting constantly out here. Here comes Scott Goodyear. He's coming down inside of Arie Luyendyk, and Scott Goodyear picks up the position.
Well, that was a move we didn't much think was going to happen. That was a fine, fine piece of driving on Scott Goodyear's part, Paul.
Boy, he's showing some moxie.
As you see Rahal out front of Little Al, it's only lap 22 of 80, and it's premature to say this, but a win by Rahal would vault him into second place in the championship standings. And then the Gallus team would be first and second overall in the championship.
Well, Lyondike is headed down into the pits. Jeff Woods also in the pits for what looks to be some lengthy service now. Bobby Rahal out in front. There is the Tony Bettenhausen car as well. So now perhaps the heat of the day is beginning to tell on some of these machines. You already had the report from Gary, and there comes the culling off the Bettenhausen car.
If you notice, yes, they just get too hot, way too hot, and especially like under the yellow flags, Paul, that's when the heat soaks in, gets things like the spark boxes. Did you see little Al running behind Rahal there? It's just a very good possibility that he backs off a little bit, because if they read like 100 degrees centigrade or 105 on their water temperature, they better slow down or the engines are not going to make it.
Well, right, because remember, here at this altitude, water boils at a lower temperature. Boils, what, about 195 instead of 212?
About 200 degrees right here, Sam. But what they do is they put radiator pressure caps as high as 35 pounds, where the people on the road that drive normal cars may be running a 7-pound cap. Most of these have from 27 to 35-pound pressure cap to keep the water at a lower boiling point.
Again, that puff of smoke in the back of second place Al Unser Jr.'s car. There you see Jeff Woods' machine as they're servicing the car in the pits, trying to get it back into the action. And some of the corners are beginning to show the wear and tear of this run as well. That too could become a factor as the temperatures rise throughout the afternoon here in downtown Denver, Colorado.
The biggest problem right now, Paul, is the clouds are slowly going away at top.
There's one of the corners, Bobby.
Yes, it is, and you can just see how much they're working on it. The temperature, I started to say, with the sun coming down and beating on it, makes the pavement soft, because the direct radiant with no clouds up there really makes the pavement hot.
There was quite a bit of guesswork, though, for the Goodyear tire engineers here, because in constructing these streets, and they spent, by the way, about $5 million to put this entire circuit together with the streets and the barriers and everything, they put a resin-like chemical in the asphalt that they use. It's made it very, very hard.
Silicone.
That's made it difficult to try and estimate exactly how the tires will traction on this surface and how long they'll last.
And it's turned out to be a pretty good surface. For as crooked as this course is, as busy it is, and as pretty as it is, it's still a very fast course, just because there's 16 turns a lap.
John Andretti, the remaining Porsche, battles with Jan Beekes, who has had a tremendously good time here at Denver. Young man, former driving instructor, really showing his stuff.
Well, obviously, John Andretti, if the radio is working to him, has been informed about what went wrong with Fabi. Interestingly, here comes Beekes, a physical fitness buff who's been up here for several days getting ready at this high altitude. Look at the big brake ducts on the front of John Andretti's car, the same ducts that they had on the front of Teo Fabi's car, which evidently were not good enough to keep the Porsche brakes working.
Sam, as I went around and looked this morning, I saw that the Porsche cars had the biggest brake ducts. The second biggest was probably on little Al's car right there.
John Andretti came out of that caution period in 20th place and has worked his way back up into 10th place now. Let's go to the pits once again and Gary Gerould.
Paul, Bobby Rahal's team anxiously wanting a yellow, because remember, he and little Al have yet to make their first pit stop. We should point out that Bobby starting 14th was his worst start of the season, but he had an electronics problem in qualifying yesterday. He was very unhappy. They made the change. He was fastest in the final practice session. Now he's at the front. All they want now is a yellow to get that first pit stop out of the way. Paul?
Well, Bobby Rahal just completed his 25th lap with little Al about a second behind him. Bobby, what would you create as a window for a pit stop?
Well, they're going to have to stop, in my opinion, around 32 laps. And at 32 laps, they're still going to have to make 2 pit stops. Then even if we have a long yellow, still going to be a 2 pit stop race, in my opinion, Paul.
You get a good look at the side of Bobby Rahal's car. You can see how they have cobbled out the side of that machine to allow those coolers to breathe and try and cool that engine more effectively.
After his terrible qualifying in 14th yesterday, I talked to his wife, Debbie, briefly. She said, he's gotten all the bad luck over with. He'll be fine tomorrow. Looks like she knew what she was talking about.
Well, he certainly should, Sam. He's one fine race driver, and he's exceptionally good on road circuits, and especially road circuits like this, what we call the street circuits. As you watch the cars run here, a lot of you have watched races on the long tracks. Watch how the suspensions work. They're much softer sprung here than they are, like, for example, at Michigan or Indianapolis. You can physically see the tires sometimes working up and down.
Alan Wilson, who helped design this track here in Denver, Colorado, watching these corners just like we are, and they've checked it. They can actually go out and physically take a close look at it. And he said that as we take a look at Debbie Rahal, that the track's not really coming up. What we're seeing is some of the fast dry that has been laid down on the surface with the other racing that is here today. So that's good news, and certainly the performance of these cars is not showing any problems at all. Let's look at Rahal as he winds his way inside Randy Lewis, while Willie Ribbs slows down on the inside of that corner at the same time.
Willie T. Ribbs has just not had any good racing this year with the Indy cars. Quite a good driver, exceptionally good on road circuits. It's a shame they don't get his car working a little better. There he is right there coming up. He's the only black driver we've had in Indy cars, and he's just one fine race driver. He really deserves a good ride, Paul.
Well, he's not having good fortune here today, and he is. You know, you've seen Willie Ribbs, especially in the Trans Am, so strong, so many places. A very skillful road racing driver, no question about it. The battle now between Scott Goodyear and Emerson Fittipaldi for 6th place.
This is extraordinary. The man, Emerson Fittipaldi, who won Indianapolis.
Here's Rick Mears coming alongside Beekes. And Rick Mears moves inside Jan Beekes and picks up a position, 11th place.
These are things that we find are quite a surprise. It takes a track like this track at Denver, which is quite a beautiful track, but a hard track, to see guys like Jan Beekes, who normally are not running near the front, and a guy like Rick Mears, who's long gone from him. Now you're seeing they're having a good battle.
Remember that Mears lies currently 3rd in the championship. He needs every single point he can get today. Right now, he's not earning very many of them, but I suspect you will see a slow march by Mears up to 5th or 6th.
Now you wonder if the Mears philosophy isn't at work. Mears is a master at saving a race car. He knows what everyone knows coming into this, that brakes are critical, engine temperatures are critical. He runs in 11th place, but how many times have we seen him drop well back? In fact, the last time he won the Indy 500, fall to a lap behind and then come back to win.
Yeah, he's only earned 1 point in his last 2 races, so anything he earns today is going to start him back again in the championship course.
And just keep in mind with Rick Mears, he's had bad feet damage and a bad wreck up in Canada one time. It'll affect him more on this track than it does in most of the road circuits.
So at the front of the field, it's Bobby Rahal leading his teammate Al Unser Jr. In 3rd place, it is Mario Andretti. We'll be back with more from the streets of Denver. Back in Denver, Colorado, the Texaco Haviland Grand Prix of Denver. A beautiful shot of the state capitol looking down on the central portion of the city, the U.S. Mint, which is also, by the way, the 2nd largest gold depository behind Fort Knox. And the fight is for money on the streets. And there is Scott Goodyear in that 11 car being chased by former IndyCar champion. We've got a problem, and of course it looks like we've got Beekes together with Hall. Both drivers stay in their car, and it's difficult to tell how much damage there may be. Those tire barriers in front of the concrete minimize damage, so maybe they both can get restarted.
Dean Hall's going to have some damage because he's into the tires. For sure, at least got a wing, Paul, probably a right front corner.
Here's the situation, Bobby. Beekes, Dean Hall. Another brake problem.
Beekes just got in there a little too deep. Dean Hall was trying to go around the outside of him, and he just couldn't make it. Beekes locked up his front brakes. There's the deal again, where the brakes are probably getting too hot, and he didn't have the stopping power.
And even though there may be no obviously visible damage on the car, when you bounce in the air like that and tap somebody else, good chance you got a lot of things that are bent in there. There's Eddie Cheever. A lot of smoke at the back of the engine. That could be signs of a problem.
That's signs of overheating again. A lot of it's because you run behind the other cars too close. He's definitely burned up the engine, it would appear to me, Paul.
See him using a fire extinguisher actually filled with water, and they're using it as a cooling agent. Get some moisture in that car so that they can transfer the heat out of the engine.
And quite
Jeff Wood back under power.
And quite the opposite. There's Jeff Woods. He's back under power, but let's see if he's got something wrong.
He's trying to get it going, but it's just chugging along. Maybe he can make it back to the pits as the leader Rahal comes cycling past.
Kill the engine. vapor locking is probably the problem there. Remember, when it sets, all that heat is under the hood. All of it goes right to the fuel pump and the lines and starts the flood boiling.
He's right in the line, too, Bobby. This could produce the yellow that both Rahal and Little Al need so badly.
And remember, the fluids boil at a lot less, as we talked earlier. So an alcohol boils a lot lower than gasoline or water does. So when the car set like it was with Dean Hall, it just vapor locks.
So at the front of the field, it is Bobby Rahal, and we are approaching a point in the race where it may be prudent, in fact necessary, for the leaders to pit. Remember, Rahal and Al Unser Jr. have nonstop. Now, the current situation in the Middle East has forced everyone to become aware of fuel consumption. Harry Gerald takes a look at IndyCar racing and this rather sensitive subject, especially racing here in Denver. The use of fuel. The IndyCars use methanol.
The recent deterioration in the international situation in the Mideast has fostered renewed concerns over the availability and the costs of fuel, both for street use and for racing. President Bush has long been an advocate in the automotive industry of vehicles that burn cleaner and more efficiently and cast fewer emissions or pollutants into the Earth's atmosphere. A couple of things we need to note about today's racing here in Denver. All of the Indy cars do not use pump gasoline that we use in our street vehicles. Instead, these cars are powered by methanol fuel. Here's a container of methanol fuel. This is pump gasoline. You can see that the methanol is much more clear. Well, it also burns much more clearly and cleanly than gasoline, and it casts many fewer emissions and pollutants into the Earth's atmosphere. Now, methanol may not be the cure-all of the future, but it could well be that in the not-too-distant future, when we pull up to a gas pump, we may be pumping into our street machines methanol as opposed to the gasoline that we've used for so many years, because methanol may well be the fuel of the future.
It's also important to remember that methanol does not come from the cracking process of oil. There's no petrochemical in it at all. In fact, it's used from old garbage, corn husks. I think it's definitely the fuel of the future, and the Indy cars certainly know how to use it and use it with power.
And you can't drink it. Everybody better know that. They can drink ethanol that you hear about, but not methanol like they use in the race car.
I figured that'd come from you.
They use them here in the buses. They use methanol in the buses in Denver.
Matter of fact, an interesting point, that the Indy car is running so efficient and so clean in using methanol that it's actually helping any pollution that might exist in downtown Denver right now. The battle as Danny Sullivan closes in.
You can watch him wiggling coming off that turn a little bit now. His tires have got to be getting hot. The racetrack is definitely getting a little hotter, slipperier, Paul.
Sullivan trying to catch Mario for third. Let's go to the pits, Jack Arute.
Well, we talk about brakes, the concern for brakes. Eddie Cheever has that concern. They're changing the left rear brake pads. You can see what a delicate operation it is when the temperatures are as high as 300 degrees. Two crewmen using pliers, kind of like forceps, as they engage in this operation on the back of the target machine.
If driver fitness becomes an issue later in this race, it should be noted that Danny Sullivan, here pursuing Mario Andretti, lives in Aspen, Colorado at 7,000 feet, is very used to this kind of altitude. So is Al Unser Jr.
Let's go back to the pits of Gary Gerald.
And Scott Goodyear, who's best this year in 8th at Detroit with a terrific early run in Denver, getting his first service of the day. The crew running a nice rhythm. Remember, with less air pressure, it takes longer to refuel these cars. So this is going to be a 21-second stop for Goodyear as he pulls away, Paul.
Ever since the great Gilles Villeneuve represented Canada in international racing, the Canadians have been looking for another great star. They may have found one in Scott Goodyear. Certainly he has the talent.
There's John Andretti, the sole hope of the Porsche contingent now, with Teo Fabi, the pole sitter and the early leader, losing brakes and running off the course. And that, of course, is Alfa Romeo power. Roberto Guerrero at the wheel just in front of him. There's the leader of the race, Bobby Rahal. He comes past the pit entrance yet another time, so he will stay out. The indications are, though, with this being lap 32, this should really be the window. Bobby Unser suggested that, and Al Unser Jr. should be due in for a stop.
Well, Paul, I made one little mistake on that window I gave you. I didn't figure in the yellow flags. We had about 4 yellow laps, so they should be able to go to about lap 34 before they pit.
But Al Unser Jr. is already in. He takes on a load of fuel. The crew goes to work on the car. Here's Gary Gerald.
And they complete the rubber change. He's off the jacks, and you hear him speed away from us, Paul. It was a good stop. Didn't get a watch on it. He's down under the bridge and tough to get access from camera point of view. They now wait for Rahal in the next adjacent pitch the other side of the bridge.
And from the onboard, you've got a good view of how difficult it is to navigate through the pits. And there you see how tough it is to come out of the pits, because you join the course right in the fast line as Little Al comes alongside Scott Brayton and back into the action. Now here in Denver, the first run of the streets, it started out with Teo Fabi on the pole. But very early on, Fabi lost his brakes, a big concern of the day, and ran head-on into the barriers at the end of the fastest straight. That gave the lead over to Al Unser Jr. Then Bobby Rahal came up to battle with Little Al, and Rahal took the lead. Now Rahal currently has the lead. Little Al has made his first stop of the day. Rahal is expected into the pit shortly. It's been some terrific action here in Denver. There's Maury Cranes as he keeps track of Bobby Rahal's car. The action continues in the streets of downtown Denver. We'll have more after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Michael Andretti working his way around the course. Bobby Rahal still in front, anticipated to stop any time, and Danny Sullivan worrying Mario Andretti as much as he can for second place. Sullivan tries, lights the brakes up, a little too much rear bias on the brakes there. The brakes, the pressure front to rear is cockpit adjustable for these drivers, so Danny Sullivan will have to be thinking about how he wants to set the brakes now. Let's go to Jack Arute.
Paul, Mario Andretti is in precisely the spot he wishes to be, according to the conversations he's having on the radio. Remember, they took advantage of the full course caution, took on fuel. They have battled through full loads. They're working on a light load now. They'll be able to pit 10 to 15 laps later than Bobby Rahal. So while Rahal is struggling with a full load, brake-weary car, Andretti will be able to make up some time running lighter without as much pressure on his brakes.
Watching the leader of the race, Bobby Rahal, as he stays out and stretches his fuel tank as far as he can. Here comes Sullivan with another try.
You notice his brakes weren't puffing then, Paul. He adjusts them a little bit. But remember, they're getting so hot that he can't rely on them. He has to try them and test them out constantly to see if they got too hot and they're going to fail.
Running with 36 laps of the 80-lap scheduled distance. There goes Sullivan. Boy, he just picked the spot. Cruise right on through. Nice little maneuver there.
Well, that was a good maneuver. Now, what he did, just like we said, he sat there and adjusting his brakes, trying to make sure that when he went down there, he had them good.
80 laps, the scheduled distance, 152 miles, and Danny Sullivan picks up second place, now chasing Bobby Rahal, due to stop anytime.
Now, you can just watch him pulling away from Mario, and that gives you an idea how much better Danny was holding, how much Mario was holding him up.
That's the second place that he has picked up. As you see Bobby Rahal here, we wonder, will he be pitting this lap? Rahal, yes, he does go in. That was the second place that Sullivan picked up under braking. You wonder if he's using his brakes too hard.
Here's Gary Gerald.
And indeed, Bobby Rahal, with all that open body work, Barry Green with the sign in front is showing him a handheld side saying reset meter. That's for the cockpit work. Got a little water hose on the side here where they'll try to shoot in and perhaps cool down the radiators. That's one of the suggestions at the mechanics meeting. They grabbed at something at Rahal's helmet, and in 17 seconds he's away. Tugging at something on the helmet on the left side just as he came down off the jacks, Paul.
So Bobby Rahal comes roaring out of the end of the pits, but Danny Sullivan picked up the lead with Rahal making the stop in the pits. There's the new leader.
Now we want to watch because Bobby Rahal probably doesn't have radio. That's the reason that Barry Green was giving him signals in writing on a piece of paper. Now that could hurt him really bad.
And that message to reset the counter, Bobby Rahal uses a flow meter that tells him how much fuel has been used so he knows when he can come in the race.
That means that he can't correspond with his pit and tell them what's going on, so they can't work as a team. He's going to have to run most of it right from his race car, I think.
Speaking of a team, once again they are together on the circuit. Al Unser Jr. is lined up behind Bobby Rahal. Little Al is fifth. Bobby Rahal runs in fourth place. The leader now, Danny Sullivan. Mario Andretti still stays in second place, but Michael, with the stops, has moved up and assumed third position.
Well, one thing you know about Michael, if Mario has a good setup and the crew could have adopted that hastily to Michael's car, there's an advantage of where a two-car team could work together.
So on board now with Al Unser Jr. Preseason special here on ABC. Many of these teams will be heading back by air to Indianapolis to work on their cars. About 12 of the teams headquartered there, and I'm sure some of them will head over to the Hoosier Dome to see Indianapolis take on Philadelphia. That's tomorrow night live at 8 o'clock Eastern here on ABC Sports. The fight continues here in Denver. Sam?
Well, this, of course, the home of the Denver Broncos, and John Elway, an interested spectator here today. As we look at the very last turn from the car of Al Unser Jr. and start down.
There's Roberto Guerrero. It's like a pretty dangerous spot right on the apex of a corner to be stopped in. And he's telling the course marshals, get me out of here.
Well, that's not a happy place to be sitting. He doesn't like it, and he's trying to tell him, get me out of here quick.
A.J. Foyt gets past smoothly. Roberto Guerrero quiet. There comes the leader, Danny Sullivan. This will give us a good interval to see where second place actually lies on the circuit. Under yellow, here comes Mario, then Michael. Well, you see, they have some distance to catch up, and there is Ray Hall and Little Al. So they're right bunched up, second through fourth. And Little Al still displaying some smoke, but everybody says not a problem. We'll let it run that way. Out of the yellow zone. Now they come back into race formation as Michael darts in, tries Mario.
And remember, the track is only yellow where the car was stopped, where Roberto Guerrero was stopped, Paul. So the rest of it, they're still going as fast as they can go.
Indy cars operate under two different rules as there comes Michael challenging the father, picks up the position, and Ray Hall comes in. He'll challenge Mario as well. Ray Hall to the inside. Little Al lines up alongside. They're three wide. As they come into a right angle corner, they speed their way through there. No change in position, but boy, look at this ice battle. This is terrific.
That's some of the best.
And Mario makes a turn down into the pits.
That's some of the best racing you can see. But when you go from second back to fourth, that's a pretty good passing, Paul.
Boy, and a smart moment to make a pit stop, too, because if something went wrong out there on the track, Mario is now safely in the pits.
So Mario Andretti comes in for service from the Newman Haas team. Tires changing on the car, and look at Ray Hall and Little Al as they come up to challenge Michael. Ray Hall now comes alongside, trying to fight with Michael for the position again. Little Al closes in as well.
And you see, he has to stay in there close, even though he's got his heart in his mouth, because if Ray Hall makes a mistake trying to get by Michael, then Little Al's going to be involved too.
They stay lined up through the yellow zone for Roberto Guerrero's car, but coming out of it, Ray Hall continues to pressure Michael. Little Al is sitting right there, and I assume that what he wants to do is stay tucked into Ray Hall, so if Ray Hall can get through, he can come through too.
Literally only inches apart. The front wings were almost touching.
There's
Randy Lewis stopped just ahead of them on the course. They should be coming through now. Here they are. Of course, it's yellow in this area, so they come up single file once again. Now back to racing at this point.
Remember, all the yellow does is means it right there. As soon as they go by that car parked there, Randy Lewis, hey, it's racing again till the next yellow or until they come back around there again.
Ray Hall drops to the inside, tries to get some fresh air into the coolers to cool that engine down. There's Randy Lewis's car, his hand in the air, and the kart safety team coming to his aid. They'll get him out of that precarious position on the course.
He's had a couple of engines go this weekend. You wonder if it might not be a third.
So the fight continues for second place. Michael Andretti, Bobby Rahal, and Al Unser Jr. Here comes Rahal to try Michael again. He may just have him this time. He goes over to the inside of the course, moves past him, while at the same time little Al comes to a wide approach to the corner, can't get around. But Rahal does pick up the second position.
Little Al knew he couldn't get through right then. He's trying to cool his radiators. Remember, any bit of air that they get in their radiators helps. Now here goes little Al by Michael going in right into that left hand 120-degree turn. One of the places we said is a good place to pass.
So little Al outbreaks Michael Andretti, but once again you have to ask yourself what's going on in the mind of Michael Andretti. Does he recognize what the brakes are doing and saying to himself, as we hit the halfway point in this race, maybe this is not a good time for me to race with him?
He just had a real hard run. He could have his brakes just a little bit too hot. Maybe he needs to let them cool for a little while, Paul.
So the fight for second continues now between Rahal and Al Unser Jr. The leader of the race is still Danny Sullivan. We are at the halfway point here in Denver with more action yet to come. We'll be back. Back in Denver, the view of the pits. Eddie Cheever's car. Eddie just climbed out of the machine. He was running in 24th. He had a very long pit stop. They didn't fix all of the problems. Now he is out of the run here. At the front of the field, it is Danny Sullivan, followed by Bobby Rahal and Al Unser Jr., then Michael Andretti, then Emerson Fittipaldi. And Bobby Unser, the question that keeps coming to mind, even though we know full well that every time we ask the question, the Penske team, any team will say no, each car runs its own race. But the way they're positioned now, is Danny Sullivan's role that of a rabbit to go out and try to run the other cars into the ground?
No, it isn't. If we read the papers yesterday, it says that Danny Sullivan isn't going to be with Roger Penske next year, Paul, and he's only going to run 2 cars versus third. They're second and third. Rahal will allow. But I think the true answer to it is Danny is not being the rabbit. He just wants to win the race. And if he doesn't win it, he wants to lead it all so everybody knows how fast he really is.
Sullivan of the 3 Penske cars in the race. You see him go into the pits there. He's losing the lead. He was the best place. Emerson Fittipaldi was 5th, Mears 8th.
And you see the second place car of Bobby Rahal pick up the lead. Let's go to Jackaroo.
And Danny Sullivan hits the marks nicely. Now, he was complaining that the car was just a bit loose, so they said that they would make a minor adjustment. We can't see any here as they continue pouring in the fuel. Gary Gerould talked about the fact that it goes in slower, but he is off and away at 13.3 seconds.
So Danny Sullivan back into the fight, making his stop on lap 43 of this run. Bobby Rahal and Little Al both came past as Sullivan cycles his way back into traffic. So Bobby Rahal assumes the lead with Danny Sullivan's stop.
If the race were to end right now as we watch Sullivan, Al Unser Jr. would extend his championship lead to 140 points he would have. Michael Andretti would be second, 24 points back with 116. Rahal would fall to third with 111, and Mears would have 107 and be fourth. If, but there's a lot of race left to go.
All right, Bobby Unser. Danny Sullivan carries his car to the 43rd lap. We know there was full course caution during the early part of the race. How far will Sullivan go now? Will he have to stop again?
Yes, he will, Paul. They actually have to stop about 35 laps. Everybody's getting better mileage here than they thought they would get, but they're still not making fuel, so there's going to have to be another stop.
So Danny Sullivan comes back into the action in 5th place. You saw him moments ago lined up just in front of Didier Taze, not in position, but running in 5th place right now. At the top of the order, it is still Rahal, and there you see him. He is chased by Al Unser Jr.
They now begin the lap here on Lincoln Avenue, heading south. They'll go 3 blocks south on Lincoln, which is the wrong way, incidentally. Lincoln is a one-way street northbound. Every Denver taxi driver worth his salt has probably dreamed of doing this. This is 12th Street. 1 lap takes you past 28 intersections and 24 traffic lights. Broadway now headed north with the city center straight ahead. Now this left takes you around the public library and aligns you with the Denver Art Museum. You see it there right ahead of you, designed by Gio Ponti. Headed west now, past a civic building toward the Rockies. They're in the distance out there, obviously hard to see. Now watch just on the left, the U.S. Mint drifts by. Of course, they'd have to work overtime to pay Al Unser Jr. the amount of money that he has earned, almost $6 million through his career so far. Colfax Avenue behind us now. That is the convention center. On Thursday night, they had a black tie affair. Rahal, I know, was there looking very, very fancy, his black tie. The Radisson Hotel off on the left. You know, one of the neat things about being in Denver is you can just walk to work. Nobody's staying more than a block or 2 away from the pits. And one of the Denver columnists pointed out this morning that Will Durant once said, no man who is in a hurry is quite civilized. And I guess it's unseemly to rush through such a great city as Denver. But I'll tell you, I think in every driver's heart is the desire to get out there on the street and just break all the rules. And these guys, I think, are enjoying themselves right now. Don't you, Paul?
I certainly do. And as they come back onto the start-finish straight, you got a glimpse of the Gold Dome. Originally, the gold donated by miners here in the gold rush days of Colorado, and lately refurbished. There's the state capitol building.
And 13 steps up, the flight of steps that leads to that state capitol building is the exact mark where 5,280 feet above sea level is. 1 mile up, 13 steps up to that state capitol.
Well, here's the fight for 3rd place. Emerson Fittipaldi closing down on Michael Andretti now. Bobby Rahal leads it, followed by Little Al. This city has been alive with excitement with this race. There apparently in the planning year has been some apprehension about the Indy cars racing here, but that all washed away when the first engine was fired. Here's Gary Gerald.
Paul, quick update on 3 drivers. Arie Luyendyk came in without power. They changed all the electronics. Could be another culprit of the extreme temperatures. He's now back on course. Roberto Guerrero stalled on course. Fuel gauge said he had 4.5 gallons. He was out of fuel. Got towed in. He's now back. And Bobby Rahal does have radio problems. They can hear Rahal in the pits, but Rahal cannot hear Barry Green and company in his car. Paul?
That's going to make it very difficult for Rahal to get the message. There's Michael Andretti's crew. The Newman Haas team waiting for the arrival of Michael Andretti to refuel and retire that car. You know, it's a complex effort to close off all these streets, to put in the some 2,700 barriers and the 4 miles of special debris fence and restraining cable so that you can safely run the Indy cars at these incredible speeds down this street as we continue to watch the battle for the lead between the teammates Bobby Rahal and Al Unser Jr. It's also quite a television enterprise, and we owe some special thanks to the Governor Roy Romer here, and Mayor Federico Pena, and of course the president of the Denver Grand Prix Association, Andy Schlenker, and Alan Wilson, the director of operations here. They've all gotten together in a tremendous effort between business and the civic organization to get it going. Here's Jack Arute.
And Paul, Michael Andretti has finally presented his car on pit road for service from his team. Carl Haas and the crew calling the shots. They have dropped the jack. A fairly normal stop in under 15 seconds. He is backing away.
Michael Andretti running in 5th place as he came into the pits. You can see Fittipaldi cycling out with him as well, as they come into the fast lane on the start-finish straight and accelerate up to top speed over 160 miles an hour here. This is a fight for position as they come out onto the track. They're fighting for 6th place. Fittipaldi chasing Michael Andretti out of the pits. The average speed belies the kind of excitement you feel when you go down this track here. We had that 1 full course caution when Teo Fabi ran off the course very early on, and 6 cars out of the run. That to summary at the halfway point. We're beyond that now at 46 laps. These are the cars out of the race. You saw Raul Boesel go out early with engine failure, and then Teo Fabi, the only serious accident of the day, though he was uninjured. And take a look at this at the front of the field. Here comes Al Unser Jr. challenging Rahal. Rick Mears wisely gets out of the way of this one, and Al Unser Jr. picks up the lead.
Well, 3 abreast going in there. Now that was calculated probably. I'll bet he looked for that for 5 laps to get Rahal going by Rick Mears at the proper time.
Well, I love it. Rick running in 9th place. Took a look down in the rearview mirrors and says, I'm getting over here to the side and let these guys come through.
Look at how hard Rahal is to come back. He's really trying hard. He says, boy, did I look bad on that one.
On the other hand, he wasn't surprised. Little Al was there, and he was doing everything to keep him back. So now you've seen the relative power of both machines and drivers.
It's the guy that's leading one of those little escapades like that, though. Watch this now. Here's Little Al. He's got Rahal blocked for a moment there. So Little Al kind of gets it. Now Rick's getting out of the way. You can see that. He says, hey, let these guys race. But Little Al already had a bite on him. Rahal was blocked. Couldn't get back in to make the line on the corner.
Yeah, but, you know, that also shows you just how really savvy Rick Mears is, because the position he assumed also gave him a better entry line through the corner. Should something go wrong with 1st and 2nd place, he wouldn't get tangled in it.
You know, the interesting thing is this is really picking up the action where it left off 2 weeks ago at Michigan. It was these same 2 drivers, Rahal and Little Al, who were battling then.
So at the front of the field now, it is Al Unser Jr. once again, chased by his teammate. Danny Sullivan has dropped to 3rd, Mario Andretti, and nephew John. We'll be back. One of the marvelous camera positions here, and we got a lot of help from the state and city government. Forrest Cation, one of the state officials, helped us get cameras positioned throughout the track, because many of them are on top of governmental buildings and the cables strung everywhere. We certainly appreciate the help. As you take a look down on this circuit, there's one of our cameras going to work. And what they're tracking, well, of course, it's a terrific race. The inaugural Grand Prix of Denver through the downtown streets, where Al Unser Jr. is out in front of his teammate Bobby Rahal as they continue to fight with one another. Once again, you're on board with Little Al now.
Let's keep keep in mind, too, also, this is the Gallus team that Little Al and Ray Hall are driving for, who've been so competitive today, Paul. A lot of the reason comes because they live in high altitude. Little Al is, for example, in very good shape. He lives like in Chaman, New Mexico, which is 8,000 feet high. Rick Gallus lives in Albuquerque, same altitude as Denver. All of these people have experience with high altitude, and that's how they're able to get their cars run a little bit cooler all the way around and know the problems they're going to face with high altitude.
On board with Arie Luyendyk.
Ray Hall, of course, has less experience at high altitude. You see Arie Luyendyk there. So Bobby came out and played some golf earlier this week as a 7 handicap. Arie has found himself so busy since his victory at Indianapolis earlier this year. He's had time for almost nothing but personal appearances.
They say it takes about 5 days to get acclimated to the elevation, as here in the Mile High City. There's also some acclimation that you would have to do to adjust the Indy car. We've mentioned that, and if that's true, then there are some people that have an advantage here. Derek Walker would be one of them because he was key to the Penske effort when they were racing in Mexico City. Teddy Mayer, also out of the Penske organization with extensive Formula One experience. So the guys who have raced at elevation have an advantage here. Let's go to the pits once again.
Well, I'm here, Paul, with the mayor of the great city of Denver, Federico Pena. And Mr. Mayor, this is a terrific outpouring of friendship and also enthusiasm as the CART PPG IndyCar people came here. What's it done for your city?
Well, obviously, it's been an extraordinary event for us. It's been very important to our economy. We've had people from all over the world here. People are really pumped up. We have exceeded all of our expectations. Attendance records have been broken. This is the first year we've done it, but apparently it's running very, very smoothly. So we're very excited. We're looking forward to next year, and this means millions of dollars to our economy, and of course it puts Denver on the map. So we're very thrilled.
Terrific cooperation. Listen, I've got a personal favor. I got this ticket this afternoon. You know, I parked my car in the wrong place. Think you could help me out?
We need the revenue. What can I say? We need the.
Well, I'll participate as part of that. Let's go further down pit road and check in with Gary Gerald. Gary?
Jack, one of the peculiarities of this pit road is the fact that we can't see from one end to the other. It's an S shape, and it's a long, long way to the other end where the Newman Haas team is pitted. There's a young man here on a radio. His name is Chris Berry, represents Michael and Mario Andretti, and his sole function is to eyeball pit entry. And if he sees an Andretti car coming in, he alerts the team so that they get a few seconds advantage in preparing for either Michael or Mario Andretti. It's about a third of a mile away and about 3 corners around.
Well, you know, Denver has always had plenty of civic pride. As we see the Andretti car of Mario Andretti there, dating back to the cattle baron days of the 19th century and the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Roberto Guerrero back running. Remember, he had to be towed off the course earlier. Just moves around Hiro Matsushita.
Lately, the focus of that pride has been a terrific overhaul of the downtown area, and of course the Denver Broncos. You know, the stands here are sold out. Even the naysayers months ago were shopping for seats in the stands this week, and the talk is becoming increasingly knowledgeable. If you ride the buses, people suddenly know an awful lot about car racing here.
Score just in the Little League World Series. Taiwan takes it, beating Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, 9-0.
There's Roberto Guerrero ahead of Matsushita. Hard for me to pronounce the Japanese names, Paul. There he is, Hiro in the Panasonic car. Doing very good. I started to mention that Roberto Guerrero in the Alpha, that's the new short stroke back again, their new engine that does produce more horsepower. They're going faster, but it doesn't look like they're doing too well on their fuel mileage.
Matsushita currently running in 19th place. That's Didier Tays just behind him. Not a fight for position, but battling on this track just behind him. There comes Michael, and he is definitely being chased as he continues his battle with Fittipaldi.
Matsushita, very precise young man, very thin, slightly built. I watched him around his pit yesterday. He got on his motor scooter, and with infinite precision, he put it in gear, turned it around, and I thought, what a precise man, and then he did a 40-foot wheelie.
So Michael Andretti now lined up behind Didier Tays, very conscious of the fact that Fittipaldi is closing in that number 1 car just behind. Matsushita comes wide. Didier Tays sees Michael as well. But finally, they have to commit to the corner, and that gives Fittipaldi just maybe a couple tenths of an advantage as he closes down on Michael.
Well, it certainly does, because Fittipaldi's going to get up and mix it up a little bit pretty soon, because there's got to be some blocking. Here's a pass going on right now. Tays coming by Matsushita. But remember, Michael is the one that's going to be an innocent victim here just a little bit, because he can't get by these slower cars, and Emil's going to work on him.
I thought we were going to see the track narrowed to just one useful lane and debris and so on, making it very narrow and hard to pass. The passing, as you see, Emerson Fittipaldi ripped by Matsushita has been so frequent here that it seems to have kept the entire track clean. I was wrong, and of course it's making a great race for us late in the game here.
Sam, I think that this is one of the best passing road circuits that we've seen this year. We've seen more passing this racetrack. But remember, 16 corners, a busy place, and yet a lot of passing.
Well, when they designed it, and it was designed, in fact, primarily by Wally Dallenbach, the director of competition for the kart series, and of course a former veteran IndyCar driver himself. Wally was conscious of the fact you need some straightaways so you can have braking maneuvers and acceleration against one another. Michael Andretti lined up now behind 9th place Didier Tays as Michael tries to hold off Fittipaldi. Mile High Stadium here in Denver. The action continues. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Back with the IndyCars in Denver, Colorado. I'm Paul Page with Bobby Unser, Sam Posey, Jack Arute, and Gary Gerould. Al Unser Jr. leads this race. He is chased about 2 seconds back by his teammate, Bobby Rahal. Danny Sullivan runs in 3rd. Then Mario Andretti is in 4th. Michael Andretti is in 5th. There's Al Unser Jr. out in front, and there is Rahal in pursuit. In 6th place is Emerson Fittipaldi, who has been closing down on Michael. Now, they've gone to a lot of work to create a street circuit here in the center of downtown Denver. The temporary street circuits force IndyCar teams to negotiate some difficulties that they don't find on permanent courses. Earlier, for our pit pass, Jack Arute was able to explore all of the different construction that had to be done to make this a viable circuit.
Whenever you convert city streets to a road racing circuit, you have to contend with certain factors. One such factor are manhole covers that dot a facility. Now, you see, a manhole cover can actually change the grade on the racing surface by as much as 1/4 to 1/2 inch. That can wreak havoc with the suspension on an Indy car. Now, what the organizers here at Denver have done to try and compensate for that is they've dug up around each of the 36 manhole covers on this circuit. They've laid down a pad of concrete and tried to even off the grade. Let's take a look and see how well they did in their job. Well, as you can see, it's nice and smooth. They've taken a lot of that bump out of these manhole cover areas. That should make for fast and very good racing.
Well, there's Danny Sullivan. He runs in 3rd place right now, 39 seconds back behind the leader, Al Unser Jr. As we take a look down through the running order, 55 laps completed in this race. The leader actually working on 56 right now. Bobby Unser, you've been busy with pencil and paper trying to determine whether or not some of these guys can go without stopping again, and for that matter, whether or not it matters. Now, our pit reporters, Jack Arute and Gary Gerould, have talked to the Newman Haas team. They say they will both stop their cars. Well, what do you think?
Well, it looks to me like Michael's probably going to be able to go all the way, Paul, without stopping again. The problem is he's about 1 minute and 16 seconds behind Little Al. Little Al's going to have to stop again, so I think he's going to be able to stop and get back out before Michael gets by. So far, right as it stands now, we don't see any big news right there. Emil probably should be able to get to the end also, Fittipaldi.
Well, that's the other question that we're checking into at the Penske pits to see if Fittipaldi can go to the end. But the Newman Haas crew certainly said that they will stop. Here's Jack Arute.
And Paul, we checked with Rick Reineman, and we'll reconfirm it again. He told us just moments ago, you've got all the fuel you need out on the racetrack.
Yeah, we kind of made a mistake with Mario, or one of the Andretti's at Michael in front of us. We wanted to try and get away from him, so we decided to pit. And unfortunately, he pitted the same time we did. Now we're stuck behind him again. We have brake fade when we try to run with him, so we got to back off.
But he's not going to pit. They're going to go the distance with what they've got. Let's check in with Gary Gerould.
Jack, here's one of the favorite sons of Denver. He came in from Miami, had a tough night. He had a good night personally, but lost against the Dolphins in preseason football last night. Quarterback John Elway of the Broncos. Quick observation on IndyCar racing on your streets.
I tell you what, it's different. It's the first time I've been to a race like this, and they're going a heck of a lot faster than I ever thought they were.
We look forward to seeing you on Monday Night Football.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to being there.
John Elway among the spectators, Paul.
Out on the track, there's A.J. Foyt. He's been battling with Rick Mears. It's not a fight for position, but it's been a nice little battle. Mears runs in 8th place now. A.J. runs in 11th. As Mears closes down just a bit, the grand champion, 67 wins, the most of any man, A.J. Foyt. Still very, very racy. So many people wish that AJ would nominate some young driver and make it a two-car team so that car would get some testing, because AJ achieves his finishes without any testing on his car, and that's really a remarkable achievement.
Foyt, of course, with 4 Indy wins to his credit. Rick Mears with 3, and many still think that Rick Mears has the time to catch up to Foyt, score 4 or even 5 victories at Indy for himself.
I think I see A.J. Foyt having more fun than I've seen him have driving race cars in years. He's not as competitive, certainly not going as fast, but he is truly having a good time.
Rick Mears, let's get an update from Jack Arute.
Paul, you're talking about A.J. Foyt. He's tried one thing recently to change his luck. What has happened is every pre-race drivers meeting, all the drivers are asked to sign a checkered flag to be given to a dignitary. For the last 4 races, A.J. Foyt has refused to sign the flag. Not because he's not happy with it, because every time he doesn't sign the flag, he finishes the race and finishes quite well. They got in his case today, and he said, not with the way you've got to get around Denver. I'll come back if he brings it back this afternoon and sign it, but I ain't signing it before this race.
Well, Foyt's best finish, 5th this year, came at the Meadowlands track, which is not that different from this one.
Well, you can see some tape flapping at the side of AJ's car. That shouldn't be anything critical. AJ, by the way, started back in 24th, now running up in 11th, so he's having a pretty good day. And Bobby Unser, as you and I walked through his pit just before the start, AJ said you want to drive this thing. Were you tempted?
Yes, but he's just kidding a lot, because this is a tough race. He knew it was going to be tough on him and the car today. Now, Foyt is a mechanic. He's an engineer. He understands the whole thing about motor racing. You notice his hasn't been overheating. He's been good shape compared to most of them, I think.
Other races run here over the weekend. They had quite a celebrity race. Vince Neil of Motley Crue took the win there. In yesterday's Trans Am, Tommy Kendall took his 5th win of the year. And this morning in the American Racing Series, Mark Rodriguez pulled off his first ARS win. So there's been a lot of action on the track here, the streets of downtown Denver. Take a look at A.J. Foyt as he comes inside Matsushita.
Of course, you know, it's a rare thing to see the guys go down the straightaways and not even try to use slipstream or drafting to get by. The reason, again, is they need the air in the radiators.
Let's go to the pits again and Jack Arute.
Man, I'll tell you, there's all kinds of celebrities down here on pit road, but this guy here, Vince Neil, does a mean band with Motley Crue. But yesterday afternoon, you did a heck of a job behind a Geo celebrity race.
Yeah.
You said that the Motley Crue was going to score 1-2, and you did.
Yeah, we came here to win. You know, we did it. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Now, I understand, though, that you had a couple of close calls out there. Was it a little more than you thought it was going to be?
Well, I mean, the only close call I saw was in my rearview mirror, so it didn't really bother me.
What do you think of this racing craziness?
I love this. I mean, this is great. This is something that if I didn't have to be on stage every night, I would be here at the track.
Well, he's been following this race very closely in the Andretti pit. Oh, you got his MTV hat for the Celebrity Challenge, and look what he gave me.
There you go.
See if you take this back to the boat in Daytona, huh, Paul?
Well, you're all set now, Jack. The fight continues now for 5th place. Michael Andretti with Fittipaldi lined up just behind him.
Fittipaldi, of course, the winner of the Indianapolis 500 last year, the winner of the kart championship, a man who there's no way at the end of last year you could imagine that he would get this deep into this season. This is the 11th race without having won one, but he has not won one yet.
Remember, as we watch Fittipaldi, the report we got from Jack Arute when he talked to his crew chief, Rick Reineman, and that is that Fittipaldi has enough fuel on board to go the distance. So these cars in front of Fittipaldi, as they stop, Fittipaldi should cycle up toward the front, but Fittipaldi slows it down. Did he miss a gear? No, he's in trouble. Fittipaldi's got a problem there.
He's just coasting, Paul. There's no reason for him to be low on fuel right now, so I think it's going to be a lot more serious problem like that. The engine is not smoking. He has no smoking coming out. Could be a drivetrain problem.
Yeah, but one of the other concerns was with all the onboard management that these cars have, all the chip technology as Al Unser Jr. comes into the pits. Let's go down to Gary Gerould.
And little Al hits the marks. It should be for the final time today. They have the #1 pit. They picked it by design. They wanted the quick, immediate service. Fresh rubber all the way around. He'll get enough fuel to go the distance. Down off the jacks. He's ready to go right now. He's trying to make it in 12.5 seconds and keep a streak alive that started in Toronto, was extended in the Michigan 500, Paul.
So Al Unser Jr. rolls back into the action, but Rahal rolled past. And so little Al will come back out in 2nd place as he makes his final stop and is ready to sprint to the finish. We'll be back with more from Denver. 61 laps complete here in Denver. We take a look at the top of the order while we ride on board with 15th place R.A. Luyendyk. Fell back. He was up in the front of the order for a while. Some other good runs. Wally Dallenbach Jr. Wally Dallenbach's son from Basalt, Colorado, not far away, is now running in 13th place. Mike Groff is up in 12th. So some of the drivers really making their first marks in the Indy cars, performing well here today. But the Indy 500 champion Luyendyk still struggling with his equipment. There's young Wally Dallenbach Jr. as he works his way around this track. Very pleasant young man, made his mark, of course, in the Trans Am Series.
Normally drives, well, he normally drives sedans, but that car is normally driven by Pancho Carter, the number 29 car. Young Wally should be better, supposedly better on the road circuit, so he's in it for this race, Paul.
Al Unser Jr. runs in second place, and he is right behind John Andretti in the Porsche car. John Andretti runs in sixth. We've seen a lot of good action. Boy, look at John Andretti. You want to know what shutting the door is? There it was.
The problem was is John Andretti didn't seem coming by. He probably would have let him get by right then, but he just didn't seem. It's at that angle with the mirrors that you just can't see. Plus, he's busy driving.
You know, we have to bring it up again because we just saw another plume of vapor at the back of little Al's car. They say there's nothing wrong with it. It's been there right since the start of the race.
It did it all day yesterday, Paul. There's just not a problem with it. It just isn't worth fixing, so they didn't do it.
John Andretti running sixth now, very creditable. This will not cost him a position as little Al goes by him. That's a lap he's putting on him.
Let's go to the pits, Gary Gerald.
Paul, just a quick update on why Rick Gallis brought Al Unser in when he did. They could have gone longer regarding fuel, but they did it to maximize the efficiency of their tires. And Rick told us that little Al has a green light. He makes the call. If he feels the tires have used all that they can provide them with in terms of adhesion, then he can come in. He came in, he has fresh rubber the rest of the distance. That's why they brought him in perhaps a little earlier than we may have anticipated.
Well, that really wasn't bad game plans. Rick Gallis can certainly see and anticipate things like that.
Well, the report coming on Emerson Fittipaldi now is that it was a half shaft that let go, and that's on the list of concerns as well. Anytime you run on a street circuit because the suspension is traveling quite a bit, you run a real danger of breaking components in the back of the powertrain.
The torque to the rear wheels goes about 10 or 20 times higher when you come off in low gears and you accelerate so hard. The cars don't get lighter. The engines just produce more power due to the fact of the gear ratio, Paul.
That is the third straight time that Fittipaldi has failed to finish this year. He didn't break down 3 times in the entire season last year.
And Sam, he really wasn't as fast as this racetrack as we expected. Normally we would expect Emo on a track like this because being the world champion Formula One driver, he has a vast amount of experience on street courses.
So Bobby Rahal at the front, Al Unser Jr. right behind. You notice that Michael Andretti's pit position was well down toward the end. We asked him if that was a plus or a minus positioning at the end of the pits.
Well, we feel it's a plus because we're going to be coming into pits with warm tires, and the guys that are way back the other way are going to have a full tank of fuel and cold tires, so it's going to be a little bit harder for them to get through there. So we feel it's a plus. But,
So on board with Michael, who currently runs in 5th place. His father Mario is just ahead on the circuit in 4th, and Danny Sullivan. The leader of the race is Bobby Rahal. 2nd place, his teammate Al Unser Jr. There's Rick Mears right up behind Wally Dallenbach Jr. and Wally raises his hand and tells Mears, go past me on the inside. So it shows his moxie developed on road courses. You take a look at Michael Andretti as the buildings of downtown Denver stream past, sometimes touching over 160 miles an hour. We'll be back. Well, the last time the Indy cars raced in the Denver area was at Castle Rock, Colorado. Back in 1970, take a look at the aerodynamics on Mario Andretti's car of those days. I think if the aerodynamicists looked at him now, it'd scare the daylights out of them. Also, take a look at Mario's sideburn. The last IndyCar driver to win in the Colorado area. And there is Michael Andretti, who was probably about 12 years old at the time.
Too young to be a race driver, Paul.
Can you imagine that Mario would still be competitive 21 years later?
Well, Bobby Rahal so far has led the most laps in this run. looking to pick up any points he can. And of course, the CART rules provide a point for the man who leads the most laps in any given race.
And keep in mind, right here, Bobby Rahal has yet to make a pit stop. We're guessing around lap 71, and we're in lap 67 right now, so it won't be long before Bobby is in.
So Bobby Rahal sitting about 10 seconds in front of Al Unser Jr. Another 30 seconds or so to Danny Sullivan. First, second, and third separated by 30 seconds. Bobby Rahal due to stop anytime.
Incidentally, when Mario won that race in Castle Rock 20 years ago, he won $11,000. Today's winner here will earn $146.
$1 million purse on the line here. Progress in more than speed.
Just a real quick recap so the people know. Little Al's made his last pit stop right here. Bobby Rahal has to make another one. That'll be his last one. But he's only about 11 seconds ahead of Little Al right now. Should be able to get him back on this pit stop.
Little Al, of course, trying to extend his championship lead. Rahal desperately trying to win his first race of the year.
Remember, too, the communications problem that we documented between Bobby Rahal and his pit. Now, Rahal has a flow gauge on his instrument cluster, and he knows exactly what, as you see the difference. There's the difference between Bobby Rahal and Al Unser Jr. He watches that number, and he knows how much fuel has gone through the engine. Here's the catch, though. That gauge is calibrated earlier in the weekend, and all of the teams change over to a racing engine, and the calibration could be off.
It certainly could be, Paul, especially with the weather changing around here. So I've been awfully hot the last 2 days, but one of the main things...
That's the number right in the center of the steering wheel that we were referring to.
Yes.
That's the number that Little Al would look for, and Bobby Rahal has a similar number.
One of the main things that we haven't been able to figure out, or that the drivers probably can't figure out today, is what the strategies are, because every team has had a different strategy, pitting at different times. So they're probably wondering what the other guy is doing, because I think a lot of them are without radio contact.
Let's get a further update from Jack Arute.
Paul, Carl Haas is documenting each and every lap, both for Mario and Michael Andretti. Their concerns right now, fuel. Do they have enough to finish? They've radioed back to both of them to try and conserve as much fuel as they can.
All right, so on board with Michael Andretti. Bobby Rahal leads, but is due to stop. Al Unser Jr. runs in second place. There's Debbie Rahal. 68 laps are complete, 80 laps of scheduled distance. And we've got a great battle on our hands here in Denver. We'll be back with more right after this. There's Roberto Guerrero sitting in the cockpit of his Alfa Romeo powered car as they pulled the Colleen off just moments ago. Roberto was running on the circuit in 15th position, and suddenly take a look at the back of the car, a plume of vapor, and then Roberto turned it down into the pit area, so it appears that his day is done. More racing action will follow this race, which is running a little bit overtime right now. We've got the International Race of Champions, the third and final round of this year to resolve who will be the overall series champions from Michigan International Speedway. Now, to the stations along the line, because we're running long here at Denver, in our next station break, we will give you an extra isolated station break during our next break from action here. Lap 70 complete. You saw first place Bobby Rahal, Al Unser Jr. just behind. Rahal due to stop at just any time to replenish fuel.
And Little Al doesn't have to stop again. Some of the other cars won't have to. At the present time, Paul, there's the guy that really is in the practical lead of the race. Even though the Rahal is technically leading it, he must stop, and it can't be much longer before he does.
So Al Unser Jr. waiting, watching his teammate 4.5 seconds ahead.
Pit strategy was an important thing today, and still is going to show up till the rest of the race.
Little Al's sponsors are already running full-page newspaper ads across the country that suggest he is headed for the championship, and that he may very well be.
Just 10 laps to go in this run. There's Mike Groff, our ARS competitor in the Indy cars here. Antonio Ferrari and Euro Motorsports. Looking very, very solid out on this course. Groff running in 11th place, giving that car a good run. Some of these ARS guys, boy, they are really able to transfer into the Indy cars very well. And And that, of course, was part of the intent when Pat Patrick helped create that series, was to create a training ground for the IndyCar, and they have proven to be just exactly that. Rahal flashes past with Little Al about 2.9 seconds back.
Every time there's a race on a new course, the sense is not only what happens in the race itself, but let's evaluate the course itself. How are its marks? It seems to me that this track here in Denver has scored high points for absolutely everything. For safety, we saw Fabi go off badly but not be hurt. For excitement of race, the track is laid out with a configuration that allows people to outbrake other people and make it very exciting. And frankly, for sheer beauty, the shots, I think, are among the most beautiful of the cars themselves, but clearly the backgrounds of the buildings adds a lot to this. Do you guys agree with me?
Absolutely, and the management of the race, everyone so excited about having the race, anxious that they would run the race correctly, and they've done a marvelous job here today. Al Unser Jr. closing down on Rahal. It appears that what he wants to do is prove that he's capable of passing his teammate on the circuit.
Yes, and he doesn't really have to do that, Paul. We wonder if they have radio communication because he's pressing Rahal pretty hard. There he's going to try
Here
to pass
comes Little
on.
Al. He comes inside him, comes out, takes a breath. No, can't get it done.
Maybe he does understand that Rahal has to stop again. Remember, if they don't have communications, the pit strategies have separated the data between those two teams so much that if they don't have communication, they don't know what each one is going to do. Like, for example, I hope he knows that Rahal has to stop again, but we wonder if he's racing this hard.
So Al Unser Jr. running in second place. Now, he is just obviously right on the rear of the car. About 30 seconds back is Danny Sullivan. And Danny Sullivan could also come over and overhaul Bobby Rahal, pushing him back to third place when Rahal makes this stop. So there's a lot of pressure on the pit crew when Rahal rolls into the pits. There's more pressure than that. The Texaco Haviland pit crew contest is underway here.
There is one other
factor. And their time, let me just point this out, their time from pit entrance to pit exit. And there's some money on the line there for the pit crews as well.
If Little Al can pass Rahal, then he may be able to pick up an extra
off in the pits.
An extra point for having led the most laps. That's worth 1 bonus point. So that's in his mind too.
Let's go to Jack Arute.
Well, Mario Andretti made a call on his own as to whether to pit for fuel or not. He had 6 gallons on board, and he took fuel on to go the distance. Let's go to Gary Gerould.
And Bobby Rahal in for the final stop. It should be relatively quick, but trouble on the left rear getting a tire. Now they get the tires changed. He doesn't need much fuel for the final laps. He's been in 13 seconds. Ari Luyendyk pulls in front of him, and now he tries to get away, but he's slow getting out, and that may help Danny Sullivan. Rahal finally gets the clutch engaged and speeds away.
Well, Sullivan roars down the pits turn while Rahal has to take it very easy on the inside, and Sullivan goes past and picks up second place. As predicted, Rahal drops back to third, but he's going to come out in an excellent position to challenge Danny Sullivan. But Rahal does seem just a mite slow coming up to speed.
Yes, he does, Paul, but that's probably a vapor locking problem, and the problem should be over right now. At the worst, he might have had a clutch problem for a while, and even at that, it won't bother until the end of the race.
5 laps to go. Rahal, the faster of the two, positioned now with fresh tires to try to beat Danny Sullivan for second place.
So it's Al Unser Jr. that picks up the lead of this race. Danny Sullivan rides in second. Bobby Rahal, who has been in second 5 times now, far too many to his liking, would like to see his very first win of this season.
Now Rahal's got to pull out all stops. He's got to go for it now.
So out in front, it's Al Unser Jr. About 29 seconds back is his nemesis, Danny Sullivan, and then Bobby Rahal just behind Danny. We'll be back with a finish after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Back at Denver in Al Unser Jr.'s pit. That's his wife, Shelley. Al Unser leads the race at the moment, being chased by Danny Sullivan. Sullivan about 25 seconds lap. Back right now with just 6 laps to go. And Little Al in the position of having to be as careful as he can now because he is so close to back-to-back victories. Remember, he won the Michigan 500, beating out his teammate Bobby Rahal at that time. Now he's trying to do it again. Let's go to Jack Arute.
Chuck Sprague and Tim Bumps are here. They call the shots on Danny Sullivan's operation, timing each and every lap. Chuck, you've determined that you're not going to bring Danny in again.
No, we're all set. We stopped late enough on our second stop that we can make it to the end.
Well, that's the story from here. We'll have to wait and see if it's true. Let's check in with Gary Gerould.
And Rick Gallus is down here calling the shots in the Al Unser Jr. pit, and as he continues to clock, maybe a quick word. Your concerns in the final laps, Rick?
Well, you always have concerns, but right now I think he's doing a good job, and the strategy's kind of worked out in our favor with that early pit stop. So we still got 5 laps to run, Gary, so we'll just have to wait and see.
How extreme are the temperatures? Are you getting any indication?
It's hot out there. It's hot, but it's hot on everybody, so hopefully we'll be okay.
Trying to go for 3 in a row. They continue to wait, Paul.
So 5 laps to go. Al Unser Jr. Bobby, you heard Chuck Sprague. You believe that strategy?
I don't think they really have any choice. The penalty, if they do stop, is a bad one. They're just going to get passed by Bobby Rahal. It's a typical Penske type thing. They're going to gamble for it. Hey, they're winners. They're used to winning, and so they're going to say, hey, let's do it.
In order to win, you must make the big play. Now, if little Al leads all the way to the finish, then he'll have led 33 laps. That's 1 more than Rahal, who has led 32, and that will give Al that 1 point for leading the most laps. And the way the points fight is going, that point's very important.
Yes, you know, when they dropped out of Cleveland with that fire that he had, Paul, that really hurts a team because they don't get any points for something like a dropout. So, but he's been on a roll since.
Al Unser Jr. out in front. Danny Sullivan runs in second place. Again, a puff of blue from the back of little Al's car, but it's been there the entire way.
Now, even though with Danny Sullivan, we question whether he can make it to the end. He's probably been instructed to shift short. In other words, don't turn nearly as much RPM. The engines get a lot better mileage that way.
There's Sullivan as he battles with John Andretti, not, of course, for position.
And there's a real good chance, well, I don't think it's a real good chance, but I think there's a marginal chance he's going to make the checkered flag. But he won't have any fuel left.
All 3 Andrettis are running. Mario in 4th, Michael in 5th, and John, you see there, in 6th.
John's teammate in the Porsche stable, Teo Fabi, started on the pole, but then in the first few laps after leading, ran off the very first corner of the course and into the tire barrier, was not injured, but ended what many had hoped would be a spectacular day.
It's been an exceptional day, Paul. We've seen racing like this. Look at Danny Sullivan and Andretti, boy, going at it like that. It's been this way all over the track all day. I think the people from Denver are going to say, hey, we've had the best race of the year.
8 lead changes, 5 different drivers. Teo Fabi in the early going, then Mario took over, then Al Unser Jr., then Bobby Rahal and Danny Sullivan. Sullivan playing it careful behind John Andretti, but trying to get past.
He really has nothing to gain by getting by him, but by the same token, can't use up any fuel. That may be what's preventing him getting by, Paul.
3 laps to go now. The 8 lead changes here today, the most on a road course since Laguna Seca back in 1988, where they also had 8 lead changes. At the front of the field, it is Al Unser Jr., who also is one of the competitors in this year's International Race of Champions Series, and will have that 3rd and final round of the IROC for Michigan International Speedway coming up right after our live coverage from here in Denver. Danny Sullivan finally makes his move around John Andretti, and 26 seconds ahead is Al Unser Jr. The question is, can Danny Sullivan make it to the finish?
Even if he makes it, it's going to be close. And I'll bet it's just really anxious moments for him to see if the car is just going to quit. And they've got these fuel tanks where they'll pick up the fuel down to the last drop, even on a road circuit where you turn to the right and to the left.
Al Unser Jr., winner Toronto, Michigan 500. Will he be the winner here and pull the hat trick? He certainly leads the PPG points at this moment. Now, early in the run, we mentioned Teo Fabi was out in front and really running away with the action, but then he came down the start-finish straight. In fact, the straight that little Al was in fact just pulling on. Here's a shot of that earlier as the brakes went away. Mario Andretti turned into the corner as Teo Fabi caught the barrier. The good news was that he was not injured. All of those tires, they may look ugly, but boy, they do their job.
At that point in the race, it looked as if we might have incident after incident on this new track. There's Shelley Unser on the left. They do not look too worried there.
Pretty relaxed. 2 laps to go.
Shelley has a small business. You call a 900 number and get personal interviews with the drivers. I wouldn't mind hearing what some of them have to say about this race on this track.
She says one of the hardest drivers to get is her own husband.
Yes, and she's standing right alongside Tina Gallus. That's Rick's wife, who's very much involved with the race team also.
The Indy champion Arie Luyendyk is right there behind Bobby Rahal. Rahal running in third place. Of course, Luyendyk is well back in the order right now. Luyendyk running in 13th place. Rahal, the Craco SDP machine, looking solid, but still not in the lead. His teammate, Al Unser Jr., is out in front. And very shortly, may see the white flag indicating just one more lap to go. This course, a very hot day here in Denver with temperatures in the 90s, has proven to be such a marvelous racetrack. Here comes Little Al through the 16th corner, the final corner on the given circuit. And there's the white flag for Al Unser Jr. Just under 2 miles to go now, if he can only hold on. And can Danny Sullivan make it to the finish of this race? Well, it's suddenly gotten very serious for Shelley. Chuck Sprague, 10 bumps. They keep track of Danny Sullivan's car.
You can look at how anxious Chuck Sprague is when you look at him there. He knows it's going to make it to the end, but he's certainly worried about it, Paul.
A decisive moment in the development of the championship. Sullivan now beginning his final lap. Little Al, threading his way through the Civic buildings, may very well be headed toward his first national championship. He's twice finished second in the national championship. Tasting defeat like that would make this win, if it comes for him later in the season,
Danny
all the
Sullivan,
sweeter.
27 seconds back. The fuel tank must be very close to empty, but Sullivan staying on it and staying in second place. It's an interesting battle between first and second because Little Al is heading for career win number 14, which, if in fact he scores it, will tie him with Danny Sullivan for 17th on the all-time list. The Valvoline car number 5. And you tell me this crowd here doesn't love it? Boy, they're cheering him all the way around. Past the pits for a final time. Of course, they can't see the start-finish line from the pits, so they'll listen very closely to see how the race is finally called. The last corner for Al Unser Jr. He makes the turn in. Twin checkered flags just ahead, and the first run in the streets of Denver has been won by Al Unser Jr. He scored victories not far away at Pikes Peak, and now he scores in downtown Denver.
And here comes Danny Sullivan right by the pits, still running, hasn't run out of fuel yet. We're going to have to assume, I think he could coast right now, Paul. Chuck Sprague was right.
The Penske organization took the chance. Sullivan, with a last burst of acceleration, finishes in second place. So Danny Sullivan comes home in second. They're just now getting the word of that because they can't see it. And there's Little Al with a wave of victory. Al Unser Jr. has won here in Denver. Career victory, number 14 for Little Al.
I talked to Little Al last night, and he said everybody is going to be tired after this race, and I'll bet they are.
Well, here are the final results. We won't be able to talk to Little Al because the race ran a little bit longer than expected, but there's more racing coming up. Congratulations to Al Unser Jr., winner, the first race on the streets of Denver, Colorado. So long.